and welcome to another Agile IT Tech Talk. I'm your host, Sean Spicer, and today we're going to be talking about applying labels using Microsoft Information Protection to protect, label, and encrypt CUI. Now, CUI is Controlled Unclassified Information, and it's a very important information designation for defense contractors. Now, if you are not a defense contractor, this may apply to records you hold within your organization that perhaps might be related to HIPAA or the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPA. There's a number of reasons why you would want to use labeling in order to provide headers, footers, watermarks, encryption, and control where information moves, both within and outside of your environment. So let's get started. So we are logged in a demo environment for Contoso Electronics, and the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set up a group that is going to have access to the CUI. And you'll see where this comes in and becomes really important later. So now we're in admin, we're going to go to groups, active groups, and we're going to create a new group. It's going to be a Microsoft 365 group, and we're going to call this CUI approved individuals. And now our owner is going to, in this case, be me. And you generally do want to create two owners, but since this is a demo tenant, we're just going to do me. So the group email address, we're going to call this CUI approved. This is going to be a private group, and we're going to go ahead and create a team that will be useful later. We're going to review and create group, but we're not done yet because right now we have an empty group. We're going to want to add some people to it. There we go. Now we're going to go and close. We're going to search for the group. Members. Whoops, I do not want to manage an owner here. I'm going to add some members. We're going to add myself, mod administrator. Let's go ahead and add Alan and Megan. And let's go ahead and save these changes. And now right now, this is just a group. There's nothing really special about it. But now what we need to do is we are going to go down to compliance, show all, and we need to go to information protection. And now we have labels, label policies, and auto labeling. The first thing we're going to want to do is create a label. And what we're going to do, because you can often be managing multiple types of CUI, is I'm going to show how to create groups with sub categories. So the first one we're going to do is CUI, Controlled Unclassified Information. The display name will simply be CUI. Master group for undesignated CUI types. And my caps lock key. Okay. Now the undesignated, I'll show you why that is important here in a minute. So next, we want to set the scope for files and emails. And Azure Purview is in preview right now, but this allows you to apply labels and protect information in SQL databases, Azure Blob storage, so that you can get really granular about your information storage, but you can also take it outside of Office 365. Now, one important thing to note is if you have applied sensitivity labels in the past using Azure Information Protection, I believe they are sunsetting that functionality in March 2021. So you will want to migrate all of your labels from AIP into Compliance Center. So choose protection settings. We want to go ahead and encrypt the files and mark the content of files. Configure encryption settings. We want to assign permissions now. User access to content expires never. Now you can set this that information that has this label will be turned off, or access to it will be turned off after a certain number of days. So this can be useful if you're doing a financial review and you want to label something that, okay, this is going to be locked down in 7 days. However, in this case, we don't want to do that. Now, allow offline access is really nice. So if you have endpoint protection set up and you're using mobile information or mobile application management, mobile device management, and you want people to be able to access the file, let's say they're on an airplane or their internet goes down, they can access it for a certain number of days before they need to authenticate with Azure Active Directory before they lose access to it. In this case, let's give it a 3-day window, and we want to assign permissions to specific users and groups. And we are going to add a group, and we're going to go ahead and add that group we just created, the CUI approved individuals, and add, save that. Now down here, you've got the option to use double key encryption, and this is required for certain levels of CMMC compliance. And what double key encryption is that there is encryption within Microsoft 365, and Microsoft holds that key. Using double key encryption, you're able to specify a secondary double key encryption service where you hold the key. And that means that Microsoft employees can't even decrypt that information. There's some things to be really aware of if you're using that, but I do not have a double key encryption service for this demo tenant, so we're going to skip it. The one thing is, if you lose your key, you lose access to all information that's been encrypted with it. So if you don't need it, go ahead and trust Microsoft to keep hold of that key for you. Now we want to turn on content marketing. Now, in terms of marking CUI, you never want to add a watermark to CUI information. It's prohibited. Now, let's see. I don't want that window. I have the CUI category information and this here. This is the official documentation on CUI marking, the CUI marking handbook, and it talks about everything that needs to be put into and how you properly mark things. I'm going to be using this as a reference, as well as CUI categories coming from the DoD's Controlled Unclassified Information marketplace or listings from here. But let me move that over to my other monitor. That's not important yet. Right now, we're going to add a header. And for marking, the headers are set up as CUI // and then this portion here is the category of CUI. Now, since this is going to be a top level for a number of different classes of CUI, what we're going to do is we're going to make a different type of header for this, and it's simply going to say controlled. This is not an official marking, but it is a sufficient marking. We want to make that font size 18 so it's nice and visible. Now we're going to add a footer. And again, we do have specifications on how that is marked. And that footer should include the contact information of the organization as well as who is controlling it. So controlled by Department of Good Work, Security Inspection Division, along with the contact info. That is required. So we're going to go ahead and put that in here and customize the text. And we're going to say controlled by Contoso Defense Security Division, and give it a number. Let's give it Agile IT's number. And we do want to keep that font size small. So we save it. Now we're going to have the automatic content marketing. It is important to know that this will be applied to documents, so it'll go in PowerPoint, Excel, Word, but it will not be applied to email messages. Now, auto-labeling. Now you can set up auto-labeling to detect content that matches certain conditions. For labeling CUI, and particularly in any sort of policy where you're applying encryption, you really don't want to use auto-labeling because you can make a mistake and wind up encrypting almost everything, and that will cause great impacts to the speed in which you can access and process information. It's going to cause issues with things like e-discovery. If you have third-party applications that need to look inside of documents, those are going to break. Now, in this case, we're not going to use auto-labeling, but I want to show you something nifty that you can set up. So content contains, add trainable classifiers. Now, trainable classifiers, when you set them up, and here are the ones that are already pre-established by Microsoft, you can send 40 or more documents to train your classifier. And if you do have an existing amount of CUI, you can put those documents in to be scanned through, and it looks for commonalities. And it trains itself to automatically recognize those commonalities in order to apply automatic labeling. In this case, I am in a demo tenant. I do not have that much information to train a classifier. So we're going to skip that. And again, we are not going to use auto labeling and just move on to next. I just wanted to show that that is possible. Now, define protection settings for groups and sites. I have not enabled the ability to do container controls within this Microsoft 365 tenant, but this would allow you to apply your labels to teams, groups, and sites as a whole. And I've done a tech talk in the past around Microsoft information management and information protection that shows this in use. In this case, we're not going to do it because I want to walk through the entire setup. So next, now this is part of that Azure purview. You have the ability to do auto labeling for database columns that contain certain info types. So if, for example, you had a marketing database or a patient database that had credit cards, social security numbers, things like that, you can go ahead and select your sensitive information types and it will automatically label those rows within the database as protected. In this case, we are not going to do that. Again, just showing off some of those extra capabilities. So we get the chance to review. We're going to go ahead and create the label. And the next thing we're going to have to do is publish the label. So we're going to go ahead and publish the label. We're going to choose the sensitivity labels to publish, and I'm going to get into this a little bit deeper here in a minute. We're going to go ahead and add, and then we want to publish to users and groups. Now, this is important because if you choose to apply a label that is only going to allow documents to be read by a certain group of individuals, and you publish it to everybody in the company, people can potentially label a document they're working on to where they lose access to it, can't unlabel it, can't edit it anymore, and you're going to have a headache. In this case, we want to just publish to the CUI approved group. Search for that, publish to them, and add, and done. One user or group. Next. So now what we want to do is we do not want to apply this label by default. We want users to provide justification if they remove or lower a classification label. And let's provide users with a link to a custom help page. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to give them a link to the archives.gov Controlled Unclassified Information Registry. We're going to name this CUI Top Level Designator for CUI. Next, review settings and submit. Takes a couple seconds. New sensitivity label policy has been created. Done. Done. All right, so now you'll see we've got labels and we've got the label policy. Now what we want to do is we want to create a sublabel. So here we're going to click the ellipses, add sublabel. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add an actual CUI designator. And for this one, we're going to do CUI. Let's do controlled technical information. We're going to display that as CUI-CTI. Now, this is not the marking. Normally, the marking would be 2 slashes. You cannot use forward slashes or backslashes within the display name. Description for user. Now, I'm going to show you what the designation is for controlled technical information here. And I like the examples section here to use as a tooltip. We're going to copy that. You can't copy the whole thing in. I believe you are limited to 255 characters. Let's see, I think it'll tell us here. Nope, it does not, but let's go ahead and give that tooltip. We can use it in both places. Go ahead and next. It's already set up to work with files and emails and Azure Purview. We want that information encrypted. We want to mark that information. Now, in terms of controlling who can access, we do not want to remove encryption if the file is encrypted. We want to configure encryption settings. We're going to assign those permissions now, same as last time. We only want people to access this offline for 3 days. You may want to be more strict with this depending on the information you have and what the work environment is like for the individuals in your company. So if they're constantly traveling, maybe you want a higher number. If people never leave the office and should not be accessing it without being authenticated, turn off offline access altogether. Now we're going to go ahead and assign permissions. We're going to add that CUI group again. And add it. We're going to save. It shows it down here. Again, you have the ability to do double key encryption. I don't have the ability to do that in this demo tenant. Content marking, we want to go ahead and add a header, customize text. In this case, this will be a real marking. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to follow the rules here. Now it says category marking CTI, and this is the banner format and marking notes within the document here. It does show how that should be specified. So here is CUI, dissemination A, dissemination C. So those are limited dissemination markings. We do not have those, but for CTI, we can add one. So what we're going to do is we're going to give this banner marking and let's go ahead and add another slash for dissemination control, and we're going to put in no foreign, which is for no foreign nationals. Set that font size up to 18 and save. We're going to add a footer, customize that text, same as last time, controlled by Contoso Defense Security Division 619-292-0800. Keep that font size small in this case. Go ahead and save. Whoops. We want to center this. There we go. Save. Now, next, we do not want to use auto-labeling for the reasons I talked about earlier. We are not going to set up any sort of markings for groups and sites. And we don't have any databases to label. We're set. We're going to go ahead and create a label, and then we're going to have to publish the label. And it's important to know that when you publish this label, you can't publish it by itself. You have to publish both the label as well as a subcategory or the parent label. So we're going to add, next, choose users. Again, this is deciding who can actually see this. We do not want everybody in the company to be able to do that because they will lock themselves out. We're going to add that group. Next, we're going to set our policy settings. We want to require justification, and we want to give people a link to that help page. Oops, I cut out the URL. So we're just going to take the top level of this. Actually, since this is the entire instructions, let's go ahead and give them this. Next, and we're going to call this CUI-CTI. And controlled technical information. Next. I'm going to go ahead and submit, and it will publish. Now I'm going to show you one other thing to be mindful of is we are going to go ahead and open up a new Word document, and I'm going to fail. So, oh, I don't even have sensitivity up here in this client. So the reason why I can't see this yet is because it can take 30 minutes to publish a new policy, and it can take 24 hours for edits to a policy and a label to be reflected within your environment. But that is why I went ahead and did this earlier. And I've just got to find that environment real quick. So in here, I have done the same thing, pretty close, only this time I've added two dropdowns, one for controlled technical information and one for defense controlled nuclear information. Again, they're stacking. You've got the order from, normally you would want this to be from the least restrictive to the most restrictive. In this case, we do not have a for public use policy that we've created. So I'm just pretending that the highly confidential is not top secret, but can't leave the company. I wanted something a little bit higher than CUI. So here we are in the Office Control Panel. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to Word. We're going to create a new blank document. And I want to point this out. If you go to File and Save As, you have the ability to rename, download a copy, do PDF or ODT files. Now, and I'm going to do a couple things with the sensitivity labels to show you a couple behaviors here. So first off, we're going to set highly confidential Project Falcon. And remember, I had mentioned that this goes from most restrictive to least restrictive as you move up. So we're going to set this as the most restrictive in our environment. Let's go ahead and put something in here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to File, Save As, and you'll see that we've lost the ability to do Save As, download a copy, or save it as a PDF or ODT file. So now it is locked into the environment, and what we're going to do is we're going to bring the CUI level, or bring the sensitivity label down to DCNI, and here we have to have a justification. So we're going to go ahead and say downgrading from Falcon to CUI. Now we've got this new label applied, and now it can take a moment for the header to actually show up. And in the web view, you don't get it by default, but here you can see that it's automatically applied that header and the footer that we designated earlier. So this is pretty much as you see it, and we've now applied encryption as well as sensitivity controls to this document. So in a nutshell, that is how you can very quickly create labeling and policies in order to protect, label, and encrypt your controlled unclassified information. Now, there is a lot more that goes into this than simply applying a label. And I will be doing a video here shortly. I've been working on the PowerPoint for a couple of days around CMMC, the levels of control, and managing FCI and CUI. And FCI is federal contract information, CUI, controlled unclassified information. And at the different levels of security and compliance that are required, so from CMMC level 1 to level 3, then level 4 and 5, there are more and more controls that need to be there. This is just one small piece of meeting that compliance. However, we have found that we can cross the line using just Microsoft 365 to meet NIST 800-171, CMMC level 1 and 2 in commercial, and CMMC level 3 in GCC high. Now, I will be covering the nuances around that. I want to clarify really quickly that there is no requirement for GCC high across any of the CMMC levels. However, CMMC is mandated by DFARS Rule 7021, which still calls upon DFARS Rule 7012, pardon me, that requires forensic hold of servers, that for 90 days, in the case of a breach, you must provide an image of the server that was attacked, and you cannot do that in commercial. So it's not that CMMC requires GCC high, it's that the policies that require CMMC require GCC high. So that's it for today. Just a reminder, Agile IT Tech Talks are a benefit for our MSP and CSP clients. These sessions are followed up immediately when we stop recording with an open session for Q&A. However, we do publish these onto YouTube and our blog for the benefit of the world at large. So if you're watching this online, give us a like and follow. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments down below. I love to see them, love to hear about it, and feel free to reach out to me. Thanks a lot and have a great day.